The United States put a 127.5% tariff on Chinese-built electric vehicles. The largest autonomous driving company in America imported 3,200 of them anyway, and this year it is importing them faster than ever. That company is Waymo. Since 2024, it has imported more than 3,200 Zeekr-built Robotaxi platforms through the port of Los Angeles. Over 2,600 of them in 2026 alone, roughly 300 per month per Moffett-Nathanson analyst tracking. A 127.5% tariff turns a $38,000 chassis into an $86,500 import before Waymo adds a single sensor. The tax did not stop the orders. It just became a line item on the invoice. Wall Street assumed the opposite. When Moffett-Nathanson analysts first looked at the numbers, they told clients the Zeekr vehicle, internally called the Ojai, was a dead end under the tariff load. Then the import data arrived, and the analysts walked it back. The market assumes Waymo's future with the Ojai is a dead end due to tariffs. So did we. To be frank, we were surprised by what we found. So the question is not whether tariffs work, it is what Waymo is actually buying. Here is the part most coverage gets wrong. Waymo is not importing China's self-driving brain. It is importing a computer, a body engineered for autonomy, shipped without sensors, without compute, without connectivity. The intelligence is installed later, on U.S. soil, by Waymo itself. A 127.5% tariff could not stop the orders, because the orders were never buying intelligence. They were buying the computer. Here is what Waymo actually imported, the Ojai, built by Zeekr on a base architecture called CM. This is the part that matters. SEAM was not a consumer car adapted for robotaxis. It was designed from the ground up for autonomous fleets. Look at the design decisions. No steering wheel, no pedals. The interior is laid out for passengers, not drivers. Sliding doors on both sides, a flat floor, a low step-in. Because in a ride-hail fleet, fast-boarding is the operating loop. An 800-volt architecture and a 93 kilowatt-hour battery, because a commercial robotaxi runs 5 to 10 times a private car's annual mileage and needs to recharge in minutes, not hours. Sensor mounting positions built into the body, not bolted on afterward, because in a retrofit, placement is a compromise. In a purpose-built platform, an engineering decision. That is what hardware adapted for autonomous driving actually means. Not a car that happens to work. A car whose every structural choice was made to serve the machine driving it. Compare that to what Waymo used before a converted Jaguar I-Pace, a consumer EV retrofitted with autonomous hardware. A retrofit fights the original design, sensor positions constrained, interior space wasted, conversion expensive. The all-in cost of a converted I-Pace was estimated at over $200,000 per vehicle, and the model has been discontinued. Here is the objective comparison. A Zeekr CM1E chassis is declared at roughly $38,000. Add the 127.5% tariff, and the landed cost is about $86,500. Add Waymo's 6th generation system, which Waymo says costs under $20,000 per unit, roughly half of the previous generation, and the total sits near $110,000. That puts the Ojai at roughly half a converted I-Pace, with Zeekr's Ningbo plant able to supply about 300 per month. Let me be precise. This is a cost structure comparison, not a verdict on which country is stronger. Waymo is a rational buyer, a purpose-built platform at roughly half the cost, with capacity to scale. The tariff is real. The math still works. That is the whole point of this episode. Capital votes with orders, and the orders say the computer, the hardware layer of physical AI, can be bought. Now the part that is not for sale, the system. The Ojai arrives stripped, no sensors, no compute, no connectivity. That is not an accident. It is a legal architecture. U.S. commerce rules restrict Chinese-origin connected vehicle hardware and software. So Waymo imports what regulators call a glider, a rolling chassis with none of the trigger parts. Then, at Waymo's Mesa, Arizona facility, with Magna as integration partner, the vehicle is completed with Waymo's own 6th generation system. 13 cameras, 4 LiDAR units, 6 radars, external audio receivers on custom silicon. Sensor count down 42% from the previous generation. Hardware cost roughly half. Every sensor, every compute component, every line of software US compliant sources installed on US soil. Why go through all of that? Why not just buy the whole car from Zeekr? Because this is a licensing problem, not a supply problem. The autonomous driving system is Waymo's core asset. 2 decades of development, billions invested, hundreds of millions of miles of real-world data. It is not a component to be procured. It is the business itself. You do not outsource the brain because the brain is the position. What can be bought across borders is never the moat. What must be built in-house is. So the picture is precise. Zeekr sells the computer. Waymo installs the operating system. The chassis maker owns the cost structure. The system maker owns the intelligence, and in autonomous driving, that is where the value lands. This is the cleanest proof of the thesis from last episode. In software, the model gets the headline, and the holder of the door gets the valuation. In physical AI, the car body gets the order, and the holder of the system gets the position. The computer is the hardware, the system is the door. Now the layer that is easier to miss. If China's position were only the chassis, it would be a low-margin hardware story. It is not. China built its real position earlier, through its new energy vehicle industry, on 3 layers: system, components, data. Start with deployment, where early shows up as structure. New energy vehicles reached 60.4% penetration in July 2026. L2 assisted driving, 70.5% of new vehicles. No, the class closest to autonomy, 34.2% per emit. In H1 2026, 88.4% of new energy vehicles shipped with L2 or above. The point is not the percentages. It is that China's roads have been running millions of sensor-equipped vehicles for years. Precisely the condition autonomous systems need to mature. Then the system layer. Chinese players shipped full-stack systems early. Huawei's ADS went from its first map-free urban system in September 2023 to ADS-3 in 2024, 4 in 2025, 5 in 2026. XPeng launched map-free urban No in November 2023, nationwide by mid-2024, not lab demos production systems on public roads at scale. Then, the components. China now produces about 95% of the world's automotive LiDAR, with Hesai the global leader. In intelligent driving chips, Horizon Robotics leads the overall market at 31.94%, ahead of NVIDIA at 29.38%. And then the data the layer tariffs cannot touch. Huawei's Quangkun ADS has 12 billion kilometers of real-road data, roughly double Tesla's cumulative autopilot and FSD distance worldwide. And when Tesla brought FSD to China in early 2025, it hit a wall that has nothing to do with tariffs. Chinese regulation does not allow vehicle data collected in China to be shipped back to the United States for training. Tesla worked with what it could access in country. The data stays local. That is not a claim that China is stronger. It is a structural fact about where real-road data lives and compounds. The car was never the point. The system, the components, and the data. Accumulated through early, dense deployment of new energy vehicles, that is the position. China's bet on new energy was, underneath it, a bet on becoming the operating environment where physical AI could mature. Let's put the 2 layers together, because they tell one story. Layer 1. Waymo buys a purpose-built computer at half the cost of a retrofit, because in physical AI, the hardware can be sourced globally. That is why the tariff did not stop the orders. Layer 2. The system that drives that computer cannot be sourced. It is built in-house, trained on proprietary data, and it is the actual position. That is why Waymo imports the chassis but installs the brain itself. And China? China's position is not its supply chain beats America's. China's position is that it started earlier. It accumulated the 3 things an autonomous system needs to mature: full-stack systems, component supply, real-road data. At a scale no other market has matched. China did not win because it is better. It won the starting position by beginning earlier and at scale. Here is the uncomfortable implication for investors. The chassis is a commodity. Anyone with enough capacity can build one, and Waymo is already testing a second platform, the Hyundai Ioniq 5. The system and the data are not commodities. They compound. So in the Robotaxi supply chain, the profit entrance sits with the holder of the system and the holder of the data, not the holder of the cheapest factory. That is the position frame applied to physical AI. Hardware gets the order. The system holder gets the position. Capital votes with orders, but orders follow the position. Last episode, we asked whether the market was pricing Kimmy's model or its door. This episode is the same question in the physical world. A 127.5% tariff could not stop Waymo from importing Chinese-built robotaxis because Waymo was not importing China's intelligence, it was importing a computer. The computer can be bought across borders, that is why the tariff lost. The system cannot, that is why Waymo builds it in Arizona, on its own silicon, on its own data. The car was never the asset. The system and the data are the asset, and the position on that chain decides who captures the return. This is the first scalable commercial entrance of physical AI, not the humanoid that needs to be proven. The Robotaxi running thousands of miles a week in revenue service on public roads today. The orders are real, and they vote with math, not with headlines. The model gets the headline. The holder of the door gets the valuation, and in physical AI, the holder of the system gets the return.
Scale buys time, position decides return. Drop a comment when a 127.5% tariff cannot stop the order. Is the market pricing the chassis or the system? If this changed how you think about physical AI investing, subscribe and hit a bell. New episode every week. Next episode, a framework recap after 10 episodes. Scale traps, relationships, short lists. We trace the thread running through this series and name the pattern emerging. See you next time.